So previously, we've been discussing the Great Resignation and kind of how that affects agencies and how people across any industry right now are just looking for more people. But part of that also, too, is the flip side. When you have people, you don't want to lose them. You don't want to invest all these resources into bringing on a new, amazing person just to leave them in a couple months. In this one, we're going to be talking about what we do for this is leadership meetings. The purpose of those leadership meetings are to reduce turnover, to create a safe space for people to be able to air concerns, so then we can figure out how to provide solutions to those problems, and also really help the culture. There's different cultures in every different region that we're in. Even within a state of the place, sometimes they might be a little bit more clinical, sometimes it's more talking more operations. So we utilize these meetings to really help build the company culture and make sure that we're getting to the issues within the problems.
We've been sitting down with some people recently talking about something that I think is pretty interesting that we do here at BDA, which is our leadership meetings. And I was wondering if you can kind of explore what the original idea was behind those and like why we do them.
Yeah, so I think from my recollection of where they first kind of began, I would say, is when we were expanding into North Jersey. You know, in South Jersey, we have this area of concentrated people and colleagues where it's easy for people to get together, and so the common thing for this field is I feel like I'm out on an island. So people didn't feel like that because in where we are kind of in South Jersey, it was so concentrated, everything was perfect. When we started moving farther into North Jersey, that wasn't the case, and even geographically in Jersey, it gets wider and more vast up in North Jersey. So we found this hub of where a lot of highways were coming through, so it made it easy for people to access. And we started doing these leadership meetings, and if I recall correctly, it was either like weekly or bi-weekly we were doing them. And I was at every one. Brett was at every one. We had some other leadership people who were there to make sure people felt supported and they didn't have that island kind of feel, because in every school district you come across different problems, different cultures, and all that stuff. So we were really there to help guide the leadership in that area, and as well make people feel like they're not out on that island. And it was pretty cool. So these are voluntary, like people didn't have to come, and we would try to make them fun. We would get food and everything and invite people, and we ended up having probably 20 people at these meetings, which was great. And we ended up getting an office space, so it was a consistent location all the time. And it was really cool. It created this culture of people who wanted to learn more, wanted to help each other, and really they just started forming bonds with one another, so they didn't have to necessarily reach out to somebody in South Jersey who might be an hour and a half away for assistance, and their colleagues kind of around them, which was great. Because if you look at these leadership meetings and you look at why people leave agencies, whether it be in ABA or any other field, it's a lot of times because they're not necessarily happy, sometimes with leadership, but a lot of times even with the people around them. And we talked about the Great Resignation in the last episode, and everyone trying to hire and everything and bring more people in. All that's well and good, but you have to make sure that people stay there. You don't go through this whole process of using all these resources to bring people in to your agency field, whatever industry you're in, just to train them up and for them to leave 3 months later. When you hire somebody, you want them to be there forever.
Well, I'm Michael Crudup. I'm the Executive Director of Employee Engagement.
Damon Milam, Director of Employee Engagement. I work underneath Mike here. Between myself and Damon, we actually reach out to CAs directly. We actually started a massive group chat, try to link as many CAs, especially new hires in these meetings. We try to get them information that they may not be familiar with. Especially working in PA, there's regulations that we have to follow to be able to work out there. Try to make sure they understand those compliances, and also just create this safe space, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a few things there that I really want to touch on. I like the idea that you've created this safe space for the staff, where I could imagine myself if I was in a room with my boss and my boss's boss, I'm not speaking up. I'm not saying anything. I'm like, yes, sir, I like being here. I love my job, right? But like the company's never going to grow if that's the mentality. So by like giving them an outlet, a space where they can be like, hey, I trust you guys, and that's something I want to get into as well. Like you guys, I think, do a good job with like every time I hear staff talk about like you guys and your team, I've never heard anyone be like, nah, they're all right, you know. But by doing that, you then become the messengers for it. And sometimes we know somebody might be upset and they've got some choice words about something that's going on, and they're emotional about that. So you let them feel heard. But you know that you can't go to the next person up and be like, yeah, so-and-so said they're effing tired of this place.
So this is a direct situation that's come up. Someone felt burnt out. They were overextending themselves at work. So we were able to provide them with the feedback to say like, listen, you know, this is your task or this is your duty, and this is how you can go about that, and this is how you can also move away from overextending yourself, you know, teaching them the right way to say no to a certain situation, or the right resources to use to say no, or to just kind of go around a situation rather than just being so confrontational. Because just like you said, you have those emotions, and it's like there's no possible way you can go and just expel those onto anybody, because it's very impressionable. You know, that would be very impressionable for anybody to then say, well, yeah, I know that person, and you know, they're a hard worker, but they were talking to me kind of filthy, you know. So yeah, that's like a really big thing, is just like you said, being able to take that information, take it over to, you know, let's say Brett or to Billy or to Mike or whoever, Josh, you know, whoever it is, and say, listen, this is what the person is really feeling. This is really what's going on with them, rather than taking it when it's just so raw.
I always tell them, like, it's okay to give us your raw feelings, but we're gonna cook them a little bit before we give it. You know, we gotta cook these feelings, and we'll take it to the right, you know, the right channel.
Credit for getting this together so quickly and moving forward largely belongs to two people. One is Brianna Snyder, right over here, and the other is Kate Weimer.
At our leadership meetings, and we've talked a little bit with a few other people, it's typically a chance for staff members to get together and have kind of like powwows or little meetings amongst themselves. But what I would love to highlight today with your interview is, what does that look like for the ones that you host? Because we heard a little bit about the ones in Philly so far, and we haven't heard any about yours.
So during the pandemic, all of the leadership meetings kind of got shut down. When we started to reopen them back in Ocean and Monmouth County. Now, Ocean and Monmouth County's meeting looks very different than a lot of our other leadership meetings. It's kind of a more collaborative way of discussing and talking about topics. We usually assign an article or two, and then we kind of have the staff read it, and when we come together, it's kind of like a book club, and then we discuss a lot of the topics that are in the article, how they can be applied to our everyday science, if we've come across it already, and then we just kind of like share stories and bounce ideas off of each other. We're just starting to kick off the Mount Laurel leadership meetings and then the Middlesex meetings again, and their structure will look different. So like tonight's meeting, it's more of a discussion panel rather than a journal article. And for our first Middlesex meeting to kick off, we're gonna have it be more interactive. So we'll have a presenter, and then everybody will bring their laptops and they'll learn to graph or kind of create data sheets. So all the meetings can look different, and which makes them unique.
So now what dictates, or I guess what made you decide to do things differently from maybe like what they were doing in Philly, or what like the old ones that before, like pre-pandemic, that we did up in like North Jersey? So originally this was one of the mistakes that we made from the beginning. We tried to model the meeting after what Philly was doing, and our attendance was very low.
and we couldn't figure out why. And then when we started to include staff in what they wanted, essentially, and what they would feel more comfortable with the structure of the meeting and it looked like and what they would be learning, we saw attendance start to increase. So that's one key component that I think is super important to note, is to include your staff in what they want. It's not so much what you think is successful in another county, it's more of what that county needs specifically. So we try to tailor it to each county, essentially.
That makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, like, culturally, it's going to be kind of different from place to place, especially depending on who's showing up. It's almost like you check for like social validity, right? Like, do you guys actually care about this? Is this needed? Obviously, you said the metric that you noticed was people weren't showing up. Like, you weren't getting as good of results. But how did you reach out to people to find out? Was it something like just text messages, something more formal?
So Brianna and I, we work a lot on the ground. So in a lot of our social skills outings, we would just touch base with staff, or we would just get feedback from staff through regular everyday conversation. And staff, we have a pretty good rapport with our staff, so they would kind of just give us their opinion and say like, hey, like, this is something we're noticing or something we're hearing through the grapevine. We think it would be better if we did this. And we took that stuff into consideration, because there has to be that social validity point of it. Because if the staff don't feel like it's beneficial or they're getting anything out of it, you're not going to have attendees.
Yeah, because this is on a volunteer basis, right?
Correct.
Like, yeah.
I mean, we do offer things to staff. Of course, if you're a BC, there's CEUs that we can offer. We try to raffle things off once in a while, but for the most part, it is their time, and it's after a long day. So you have to have some buy-in to get people to come to attend the meetings.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because when we talk to the guys over in Philly, for them, these meetings are almost like, and not entirely, but a good way for them to create rapport and get that pairing process in. But it sounds like for you guys, it was the flip. Like, you already had the rapport, the pairing, and this became more of a chance for like professional development.
So creating these opportunities, again, for people to see other people with the same interests as you, the same career path as you, like face-to-face, and being able to collaborate, learn, and do all that, it's really important in terms of morale.
Yeah.
In general. So you can have great rapport with staff, but that doesn't actually mean that they'll stay if they don't feel like they have some type of connection within the company, if that makes sense. But it also gives them the opportunity to get led in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because if these issues go on, and they're not big issues, they can turn into big issues. So if you're talking to somebody and they're like, hey, I know this is bothering you, you've brought it up 2 weeks in a row, you know, I really think you should go talk to this person and it might help you out. And that, again, might help that retention rate. It might save an employee from leaving and being disgruntled, if that makes sense.
So if you are like me, then the 4 functions have been burned into your brain at this point, but which is a good thing, because we do need to know them to understand people and their behaviors in a more productive way. Because ultimately, people don't have behaviors for no reason. It's a means of communication for something that they desire or something that they do not want.
I'm Brianna Snyder, and I am the Associate Executive Director of Clinical Training.
In our segment together, I want to really focus on how another organization who has not started their own leadership meetings, or maybe has but not too successfully, how they could get that started for themselves. So let's start with the things to avoid while you might be in the very early stages of like setting up your own leadership meetings within your agency. So, like, do you have any advice on some common pitfalls or things that you learned from doing your own?
Yeah, so initially when we first started doing them, especially with our CAs, our clinical associates, so maybe in other organizations it's more so that RBT type level. So when we first started them, we were just kind of putting out an email saying, hey, here's the day we're going to meet, hope you can all make it. And we would get some attendance, but we weren't doing it around their schedules. So what was happening was we would create these nice meetings and no one was coming because they're like, hey, I'm still in session.
Yeah.
So we had, the first meeting was maybe like 4 or 5 CAs, and then the next one we ended up having to cancel because there was nobody.
Wow.
So we definitely learned our lesson. We're like, oh, well, if we send out a Google survey, so we sent out a Google form, and we got an idea of what everyone's availability was. So we kind of looked at it, and obviously we can't tailor it to everyone's schedule because our schedules are ever changing, but we looked at the highest amount of times that a CA said, hey, I can make a Monday meeting from 6 to 8. That works in my schedule. So then we were able to pick that, and then we made sure to pick locations that they preferred or were close to them. So initially we did pick a couple fun locations, but it didn't help that we didn't do it around their schedule.
Yeah, so you're priming that environment.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Like, when can you be here? All right, we're going to find the best time you can, and then location, we're going to make it the most appealing location possible. Something that I'm hearing from across, interviewing, you and Kate and Mike and Dame, it's the biggest thing about these that I think any organization could easily screw up is to make it about the leader who's doing it and not about the people who it's for. So to me, that's probably one of the biggest takeaways. And it could be hard sometimes to not necessarily put your own ego aside, because I think a good leader is able to do that, but it's sometimes hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you think that you already know what they want, right? You're in their shoes, but you didn't walk that mile in their shoes.
I'd say the biggest things is always making sure that you're hearing out your staff. So making sure that they feel heard, like you said, giving them that choice and making it about them. But also, as those organizations grow, making sure that you continue to have supports in place. So here at BDA, we have so many different levels of support, and always making sure at the end of the day, no matter what, that CA who is working maybe 40, 50 hours a week, boots on the ground all the time, making sure they really feel heard and supported, because at the end of the day, you can talk the talk, but are you really walking the walk as that leader, and making sure that you're rolling up your sleeves with them, making sure that you're doing your due diligence and hearing what they have to say.
I know we sat down with a lot of people to talk about these leadership meetings, and one of the things that really hit home for me, it was a point I kind of highlighted a little bit in the beginning, is each leadership meeting is different. So in every area, there's different needs. The culture is different. How long we've been up and running in that area, how many staff we have in that area is going to be different. With Mike and Damon talking about Philly, because it's a little bit newer of an area, we're talking more about some concerns and figuring out how to work through some of these initial problems that we're seeing in those areas. And then in talking with Kate and Brianna, you can see that everything's kind of up and running smoothly, but because of those areas, they don't have as much clinical support. So they look for that perspective into their leadership meetings to make sure that people in that area are getting what they need. And I think for me, that's kind of the biggest take home in this. And it's regardless of industry, regardless of company or anything like that. Whether it be you just have one area that you serve, or you're a massive agency that serves all across America, international and everything, there's going to be different needs in the areas. So if you're able to identify what those needs are, you can utilize these leadership meetings to work through them and provide additional support for that specific need. What we used to do too is wheel spins for people, if because we always wanted good engagement. We didn't want people to just sit there and feel like they were being lectured to or anything like that. So when people were engaging and stuff like that, we would maybe throw them an extra raffle ticket, but everyone got one just for showing up, and we would pick a couple. It was never a set amount at the end of the meetings, and I'll never forget, we had the wheel. It was on the wall by the entrance, and so we would all congregate around there at the end of the meeting, and because we would pick the couple winners and everything, and we had all these dollar amounts on them, some small, but we had the Wheel of Fortune, tiny sliver, that was the high price, right? And it was $1,000, and I'll never forget, one of our colleagues, she won that day, and she went to spin the wheel, and she spun it, and it landed on that little sliver of $1,000, and she started crying immediately. She was like, I just got a new apartment, and I bought way too much stuff, and I didn't know how I was gonna afford it all. And she was like, this is so great. So it was really cool. It was kind of one of those moments where obviously we're not there, no one's there for the money. We're there to build relationships. So it was such a cool moment of everyone was so happy for her that we realized in that moment, this is exactly what we want it to be. We're constantly, evolving, making these tough decisions, and doing what's best by, most importantly, each other. Truth be told, I know if we do what's best by each other, it's going to filter down to the kids, and that's going to take care of itself. Because if we're coming to work every day in a pretty good mood, and I know not all days are great, we've had a lot of difficult conversations over the years, but as long as most of what we're doing, as Brett said, or some of what we're doing is enjoyable, it's going to filter down to the kids. Because I think we've all been a part of a toxic environment, either professionally or personally in our lives, and you know that just doesn't work well.
As things started to open back up, we had staff reaching out saying like, when's the leadership meeting starting back up? Like they were, which to me is like a good sign. Like that's a sign that people found a lot of value there.
And truthfully, I think we probably dragged our feet on it a little too much. There's so much going on during the pandemic. I mean, with schools and everything, like the days are chaos, but you're going to consistently live in that chaos if you don't find other solutions. So starting up those leadership meetings again are just going to have such a benefit to, obviously the clients we serve, but each other as well. So, I know we have one scheduled in Mount Laurel. I mean, we have a couple in Philly, Middlesex. But in the course of the next probably month and a half, we probably have 6 or 7 scheduled. Ultimately for me, which I think I discussed earlier too, is anytime somebody leaves the agency, I take that personally because that means I probably did something wrong. So I need to figure out where in the system things went incorrectly or what we're not focusing on. And the information from each of these leadership meetings really helps, and then we just modify what we're doing to make sure that we can reduce turnover. Again, after the Great Resignation, agencies are spending thousands, millions of dollars trying to get new staff on, offering higher rates and everything. It's detrimental for an agency to spend all of these resources and then for 3 months later for someone to leave. And the most important thing, and this is a personal belief in any agency, is the colleagues you work with, because if you're constantly turning over people, the agency can't grow with it, and nor can the people there.